Have you ever wondered what makes a person lose everything inside? That exact moment when the last sigh of hope is gone and only the emptiness that will be filled with something much darker. Today, I will tell a story that few know. A secret kept in the shadows of Richmond, where despair found courage in a dangerous mixture. Martha was not just another name on the yellowish pages of property records. She was the nightmare that the slaves feared, but they never dared to mention. In the coming words, you will find out as a woman, with nothing but your intelligence and a kitchen knife, has changed the fate of a powerful family forever and left a brand that time could not erase. If this story touches your heart, be sure to subscribe to the channel to know other cases that the official story tried to bury. Get ready for a revelation that will change your perspective on the silent resistance that has always existed in the shadows of American slavery. The ruins of the Thornfield mansion still keep their secrets in the surroundings of Richmond, Virginia. The wind whispers between the broken columns, carrying the persistent aroma of magnolias and the distant echo of shouts never completely silenced. On full moon nights, local residents swore that broken windows reflect shadows of an interrupted celebration, frozen in 1843. They say that in that place, the blood of the Thornfield penetrated so deeply that no amount of cleaning could ever remove it. The kitchen, now an empty space with peeled walls, was the stage where an enslaved woman decided that justice, when denied by generations, needed to be taken with her own hands. The rusty knives found during recent excavations remain exposed in the city's small museum, silent witnesses that oppression, when taken to the extreme, creates its own survival laws. The Thornfield believed to have human lives like those with furniture. Martha proved that dignity, when stolen for too long, charges its price with interest. The currents may arrest the body, but when the soul finds its freedom in despair, not even the highest walls may contain the storm that forms. In the words recorded in Martha's only preserved portrait, patience has limits, cruelty, consequences. If you want to follow more cases like this, which move with all society and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so as not to lose any investigation. The Thornfield plantation stretched over 500 acres of fertile land on the banks of the James River. The main house, a 3-story Georgian construction with 12 bedrooms, rose as a monument to the wealth built on broken bodies. Around, like satellites of misery, 30 wooden cabins housed the 87 slaves who kept the property working. The hierarchy was cruel and meticulously maintained. Mr. William Thornfield at the top, followed by his family, the white foreman, the overseers chosen among the enslaved ones themselves, and at the base, those considered only as pulse tools. The bell sounded at 4 in the morning, even in the harshest winter. In tobacco plantations, men and women bowed under the merciless sun for 16 hours daily. 7-year-olds already carried water and food to the fields. The whip did not rest. Records found later show that in 1842, 1,237 flogs were accounted for on the property. The trunk was strategically positioned in the center of the set of cabins, so that the screams would serve as a constant reminder. The smell of tobacco drying in the warehouses mixed with that of iron-marked human flesh. At night, guard dogs circulated freely, trained to attack any black found outside the cabins after the touch of collect. On the walls of the big house, paintings of bucolic landscapes and portraits of smiling checkers contrasted with organized hell that extended beyond the windows. When the wind changed direction, bringing the smell of the makeshift cemetery of slaves to the gardens of the mansion, the ladies covered their nose with fragrant scarves, complaining about inconvenience. In that spring of 1843, while the preparations for the marriage of William Thornfield's niece advanced, the air seemed heavier, loaded with an omen that no one could interpret. Martha was born in the kitchen of the property, daughter of the chief cook, and grew between pots and secrets. At 32, his hands told stories through the dishes he prepared. He knew every herb in the medicinal garden, secretly cultivated some that whites did not recognize, brought into the memory of his Angolan grandmother. His specialty was the complex sweets, with caramel worked in forms that made the guests of the Thornfield sigh. Martha Transit, where other enslaved could not, entered the rooms to serve teas, heard conversations while remained invisible, as all the slaves were in the eyes of you. Your position guarantees you access to the keys of imported spice cabinets and expensive liqueurs. The Thornfield trusted her more than any other, as Martha cultivated a mask of perfect servitude. Low eyes, soft voice, accurate and controlled movements. In the nights of great dinners, the family showed Martha as proof of their benevolence. "See how our Martha is clean and well-trained." Meanwhile, his hands prepared sauces that refined palates could not decipher. In the Cabanas community, Martha kept medicine, treated a killer wounds with secret poultice, helped complicated births. His herbs relieved pain when he could nothing else. But few knew the true heart that beat behind those attentive eyes, which recorded every insult, every abuse, every humiliation. Martha knew the names of all 86 captive companions, knew her stories, her pain, her suffocated dreams. And as he moved his calves, he memorized. Leave in the comments. Never give up the truth, if you believe justice must reach all the oppressed. Cruelty in the Thornfield plantation followed its own logic, such as a macabre symphony that grew in intensity. The first act that Martha witnessed as a girl was the whip of her father for resting in the shadow during the harvest. 16 whip counted aloud by the foreman, each marking his back as a hatred map. Then came the separations, families sold in lots like cattle. Martha saw 7 children are torn from their mother's arms. One of them, Sarah, just 4 years old, died 3 days after reaching the new property, calling her mother to the last sigh. Young Isaiah was castrated to the 16 for looking at the foreman's daughter. He survived, but his gaze was never the same. His body moved like an empty shell. Sundays brought the humiliation of makeshift auctions, where William Thornfield displayed the strongest for neighboring farmers, making them rotate as goods. A young woman named Beatrice was repeatedly raped by the younger nephew, Thomas Thornfield. When he became pregnant, he was whipped for seduce the boy and lost the baby. Martha cleaned the blood in silence, keeping each drop in memory. Little James, 8, was tied to a tree all over a winter night by breaking a porcelain plate. His frozen feet had to be amputated. Martha held her hand during the procedure without anesthesia. With each new atrocity, Martha felt something transform inside her. It was no longer anger. It was a cold and crystal-clear certainty, a purpose that solidified as a diamond formed under unbearable pressure. His face remained impassive. His hands continued to create delights for lords. But inside, something irreversible took shape. Ruth was Martha's only sister, younger for just 2 years. While Martha worked at Casa Grande, Ruth took care of the chicken coop and the garden. His hands created the most beautiful embroidery, a skill that Mrs. Thornfield explored, selling the pieces in Richmond without ever mentioning who made them. Ruth had her own light, sang softly as she worked, knew old stories that whispered for the children on rain nights. She was the one who preserved the corners of Angola that her grandmother had taught. In March 1843, William Thornfield lost a significant amount in card games. Drunk and humiliated, he returned to the plantation looking for something to restore his sense of power. He found Ruth collecting eggs. What happened next was witnessed only by the frightened chickens and by Thomas, the nephew, who watched with a smile. Ruth was found by Martha at dawn, her broken body thrown between the dirty straws. He still breathed, but his eyes were already distant. "Sing to me," Ruth asked in a whisper. Martha sang the lullable song that her mother sang in a language that you would never understand. Ruth smiled one last time and left. There was no permission for a suitable funeral. Martha washed her sister's body with rose water that stole from the kitchen. He cut a piece of his own hair and intertwined with Ruth's, keeping the braid into a small leather bag. In silence, while preparing the family breakfast, Martha took a wordless oath. He touched 3 times the knife he used to cut meat, felt his weight, his blade. That night, alone in her straw mattress, Martha bit her hand until she was bleeding, sealing her promise with the metallic taste of her own life. He did not pour a tear. He had dried inside like a tree hit by lightning, dead but still standing, ready to turn into a weapon when the storm Cierta arrived. The Thornfield family was a study on the different flavors of cruelty. William, the 58-year-old patriarch, exercised his tyranny with the calculating coldness of an accountant. Each whipping was recorded in his book, alongside the maintenance cost of his investments. Mrs. Eleanor Thornfield, her wife, preferred psychological cruelty. She separated mothers from children like who rearranges flowers in a vase, coldly observing the despair she caused. The two nephews, James and Thomas Thornfield, young people 24 and 22, had learned from uncles and perfected their own specialties. James liked to test the physical resistance of enslaved, forcing them to work until fainting. Thomas was happy to break the spirit, focusing especially on younger women. The foreman, Michael Roberts, executed the orders with religious zeal, convinced that he was disciplining wild. Each had contributed to the horror tapestry that was life in the Thornfield plantation. The catalyst event came 3 weeks after Ruth's death. Eleanor's sister's daughter Caroline announced her marriage to a rich Richmond merchant. The celebration would take place on the Thornfield property, a sumptuous event that would demonstrate the power of the family. For the occasion, Martha would be responsible for the full banquet, an honor that meant even longer journeys in the scorching cuisine. In the preparation week, Thomas Thornfield was embedded and entered the kitchen at night. He found Martha preparing pasta for the next day. What happened later was witnessed only on the kitchen walls, but the next morning Martha had a cut on her face and slimmed slightly. That same day, William Thornfield announced that, as a wedding gift for her niece, he would give Martha as personal maid. The enslaved would be sent to the new home in Baltimore after the celebration. Separated from the last community ties that still kept it connected to her humanity, Martha understood that she had reached the point without return. As he tested the sugar syrup for the wedding sweets, he felt the weight of the decision to settle on his shoulders like a family cloak. The eve of the wedding brought the first guests to the Thornfield plantation. Among them, the Reverend Hopkins, known for his sermons defending slavery as divine ordination. During the welcome dinner, Martha served her famous peach pie, receiving compliments from the diners. William Thornfield, inflated by wine and adulation, called Martha closer to the table. "This black," he announced with pride owner, "it's my biggest investment. See how it serves well. Caroline will be lucky to have her." The guests laughed and agreed, while Martha remained with her eyes low, the tray balanced in her firm hands. "Show Reverend how grateful you are, Martha," said William. The hall silenced, all the fixed eyes on it. Martha knew what was expected, to kneel and kiss the hand of the Lord, thanking for the kindness of being sold as a wedding gift. The air in the hall was dense, heavy with expectation. Martha felt the floor oscillate under her feet. For an almost imperceptible moment, his eyes found William Thornfield's. It was the first time she really looked at him in all those years. Something in that look made the smile of the man hesitant. Martha then knelt slowly, lowered her head and murmured the rehearsed words along a life of forced submission. But inside it, something has definitely broke. The humiliation burned as an acid, dissolving the last ties of his fear. When he got up, Martha was someone else. His body seemed the same to all present, but inside he had become something older and more dangerous than anyone in that room could understand. That night, alone in the bedroom of the back of the kitchen, Martha took the small leather bag with her hair intertwined her and Ruth. He tied him around his neck, and for the first time since his sister's death, allowed himself to smile. A smile that would have made the Thornfield retreat if they could see him. With just 3 days until the wedding, Martha has mobilized her carefully cultivated network over the years. Isaiah, the castrated young years before, now worked in the stables. His pain had made him invisible in the eyes of lords, allowing him to observe without being noticed. He would be his external eyes. Betsy, a 12-year-old girl who served as the bride's personal maid, would have access to the guest rooms and knew the accurate times of the ceremony. Old Samuel, who took care of the cellar, would provide the detailed map of the tunnels that connected the main house to the river, built during the War of Independence. Martha distributed the tasks with surgical precision. Isaiah would divert guard dogs with meat poisoned with the non-lethal dose of belladonna. Betsy would mark the doors with small signs indicating how many people slept in each. Samuel would guarantee that the cellar's back door remained unlocked. To herself, Martha reserved the central task. On the nights prior to the wedding, while testing recipes, she selected 3 kitchen knives, a small, sharp for precision, an average for strength, and one large for the final blow. They polished them until they shone and hid them inside one of the great decorative cakes that would only be cut during the reception. The chosen day could not be more symbolic. April 15, 1843, exactly 1 month after Ruth's death. The celebration would begin at noon, with the banquet scheduled for 3 in the afternoon. The crucial moment would be at 5, when the gifts would be made, and the big cake would be brought to the main hall. Martha called her plan, the harvest, in reference to what William had heard so many times. You reap what you plant. The countdown began the night before the wedding, when Martha cut her finger intentionally and let 3 drops of blood fall over the hidden knives, one for each Thornfield that would harvest what she had planted. The Thornfield mansion seethed like a disturbed hive on the eve of the big day. In the east wing, the maids ran to fix the last details, silk curtains being hanging, silverware being polished one last time, fresh flowers coming in wagons. The bride Caroline tried her dress for the 10th time, demanding last-minute changes that kept 3 slaves agreed at night. In the main hall, Mr. William Thornfield personally supervised the disposition of the tables, ordering the arrangement to be modified 3 times until the guests' hierarchy was perfectly represented in the arrangement of places. The nephews, James and Thomas, drank brandy in the library, planning the fun they would have with the youngest enslaved during the party's confusion. Meanwhile, in the suffocating kitchen, Martha worked. Their movements were accurate, almost ritualistic. Sweat dripped down his face as she folded the pastries with agile fingertips. The oven burned, turning the kitchen into a controlled hell. From time to time, the small leather bag with intertwined hair shook against her chest, reminding her of the purpose that now guided every beat of her heart. Outside, Isaiah whispered to the dogs, getting used to them. In the cellar, Samuel told bottles slowly, memorizing which would be opened first. In her tight room, Betsy practiced her best servile smile as she kept small pieces of chalk in her pocket. At midnight, while the house finally silenced, Martha gave the final touches on the big wedding cake. 3 layers of white pasta like snow, decorated with so delicate sugar flowers that they seemed about to shatter to the touch. In the center, the hollow space where the 3 knives rested. The dining room clock hit 12 times. In the farthest cabin, a voice began to chant an old corner in a tongue that the Thornfield would never understand. A lament, a prayer, a call. Martha heard and felt a shiver through her spine. At Casa Grande, the foreman Roberts passed through the kitchen for a final inspection. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" he asked with contempt. Martha looked down and nodded. "Yes, sir." When he turned to leave, Martha allowed her eyes to rise for a moment, watching her back, measuring, calculating, deciding. April 15th, 1843 dawned with a perfectly blue sky over Richmond. At 2 in the afternoon, while the guests gathered in the gardens decorated with white ribbons and imported flowers, Martha supervised their helpers in the kitchen. His orders were calm, accurate. His normally low eyes now observed everything. The ceremony took place without incidents under a pavilion, built especially for the occasion. Reverend Hopkins spoke at length about the natural submission of the wife, comparing it to the necessary submission of the savages to Christian civilization. When the bride and groom were declared husband and wife, 50 white doves were loose. One of the oldest slaves had spent the whole week capturing them. The banquet started at 4. Martha circulated between the tables, supervising the service. No one noticed that she had exchanged her usual scarf for a red, the combined signal. Isaiah saw and released the doped dogs to the fields. Samuel unlocked the door of the cellar. Betsy dropped a napkin near William Thornfield. Another sign. At 5:15, while the sun began his descent, William Thornfield rose to the main gift. He praised himself for creating such a beautiful niece, thanked the guests for witnessing the F.O. Virginia's 2 important families of Virginia. And now, he announced with a flowery, the moment everyone expected, the cake prepared by my Martha's talented hands. A murmur of approval traveled the audience. Martha emerged from the kitchen doors, carrying the huge 3-layer cake. His steps were slow, measured. She positioned the creation in the center of the main table and retreated a step. William Thornfield asked him to stay. I wanted everyone to see the artist alongside his work. That's when Martha looked directly at him for the second time. "The Lord plants, the Lord reaps," he said clearly, audible to everyone at the main table. Before someone could react to impertinence, Martha plunged her hand in the center of the cake and removed the first knife. The movement was so fast that William barely had time to widen his eyes before feeling the blade cross his neck. The blood sneezed in the white towel like a spilled red wine. James Thornfield got up with a scream, just to receive the second knife directly on the chest. Thomas tried to escape, stumbled in his chair, and fell. Martha walked calmly to him and dug his third knife in his right eye, whispering, "Ruth sends memories." The hall exploded in chaos. Guests fainted, men shouted by weapons. Martha remained motionless next to the three bodies, her white apron now painted red. For a moment it seemed to smile. The silence that followed was like the eye of a hurricane. Brief, intense, loaded with destructive potential. As the panic spread through the gardens of the Thornfield mansion, Martha moved with purpose. Ignoring hysterical screams and men who were beginning to organize to capture her, she returned to the kitchen. There he took the little bag he had prepared, containing the leather bag with his hair, some herbs, and a piece of cloth that belonged to Ruth. With an accurate movement, he knocked a lamp over the curtains of the kitchen. The fire spread with an almost conscious voracity, as if the house itself was ready to purify itself. In the chaos of the flame mansion, Isaiah freed the stable horses, creating more confusion. Samuel opened the gates of the fields, shouting, "Run! It's now or never!" Betsy ran to the huts, spreading the news. Martha fulfilled her promise. The house is falling. In minutes, what began as an individual action became a coordinated exodus. 84 people abandoned their huts, leaving behind only what they couldn't carry. Some hesitated. Fear cultivated for decades does not dissipate in a moment. An elderly lady refused to leave, muttering that the evil known is better than the unknown. 2 families decided to wait until dusk, but most followed the plan that Martha had discreetly disseminated over the previous weeks, to go to Rio, where 3 boats would be hidden in the reeds. From there, they would sail at night for 3 days until they found the contacts of the Underground Railroad that Martha had contacted through a street vendor who visited the plantation. Martha herself was the last to leave the property. In the center of the yard between the cabins, she opened her little bag and spread her herbs in a circle. He placed in the center the Ruth fabric and 3 thorned hair of the dead Thornfield. He lit the circle with a fire twig and observed as everything was consumed. The main fire in the big house now created a column of smoke visible miles away. Martha looked at the last time for what her captivity had been for 32 years. His eyes reflected the flames, but his face remained serene. Then, without haste, he followed the way to the river. Behind her, the flames consumed not only the mansion, but an unwavering order. By the river, under the sky that darkened, 84 people embarked in a new life. Some cried, others prayed, many simply looked forward, unable to believe in the sudden change in their destination. Martha was the last to board. When the boat moved away from the bank, she plunged her hand into the dark water and let the river wash the blood of the Thornfield of her skin. Richmond massacre news spread like a fire in the dry field. Local newspapers have published alarmist headlines. Mad havoc slave massacre family Thornfield during a marriage celebration. Richmond Enquirer dedicated 4 pages to the case, describing Martha as a demon in human form, proof of the wild and unpredictable nature of the African race. Urgent letters were sent between Virginia farmers, North Carolina, and Maryland. In less than a month, new security rules were implemented in dozens of plantations. Enslaved in the kitchen, they were searched after the preparation of each meal. Knives were told before and after use. Tastings were signed to prove the food before you. But the most disturbing to the proprietary class was what happened next. In June 1843, at the Whitcomb plantation, 30 miles from Richmond, 3 slaves poisoned their family during Sunday dinner, fleeing with other 20. In August, in South Carolina, a cook known only as Old Sarah killed his gentleman with a knife of meat hidden on the folds of the dress. In December, near Baltimore, a wedding ended in tragedy when the cake exploded on fire, causing a fire that allowed the escape of 17 slaves. None of these incidents had proven direct connection with Martha, but everyone followed a similar pattern: which the authorities came to call the Martha Method. A confidential memorandum of the governor of Virginia found decades later expressed concern about the wave of violence inspired by Incident Thornfield and recommended extreme caution in public celebrations where slaves are present in food preparation. In enslaved communities, Martha's name was whispered as a prayer, a symbol of possibility. Stories about their whereabouts proliferated. Some said that he had arrived in Canada, others who lived disguised in Boston. Many believed that he continued in Virginia, moving from planting and planting, spreading his resistance message. For the first time, fear had changed sideways. The owners began to look at their kitchens with apprehension, wondering which of their enslaved, loyal, could be the next Martha. The Martha hunt mobilized unprecedented resources in the state of Virginia. The governor authorized a $500 reward, a fortune for the time, for his capture, alive or dead. Special patrols were formed, with dogs specifically trained to follow the fugitive group trail. Martha's spoken portrait, based on the descriptions of the survivors of the massacre, was distributed throughout the East Coast. Black woman, approximately 30 years, median height, scar on the left forearm, speaks well, intelligent English well. The authorities underestimated, however, the extension of the Underground Railroad network and the determination of free black communities to protect fugitives. For 3 months, Martha and her group managed to slowly move north, hiding in basements, attics, and caves during the day, traveling only on moonless nights. In August 1843, when the group was approaching the border with Pennsylvania, the betrayal occurred. A white farmer who was passing by an abolitionist was revealed a hunter of rewards. In the early hours of the 17th, the cabin where Martha and 12 others rested was surrounded by 30 gunmen. The first shot hit Samuel, the old man's old man, when he tried to distract the attackers for the others to run away. Isaiah used her body as a shield to protect 3 children, receiving 5 bullets before falling. Martha, realizing that there was no escape, commanded the survivors to barge in the cabin. With only 2 old rifles and some knives, he organized a desperate defense that lasted 7 hours. When the ammunition was over, the hunters set fire to the cabin. Through thick smoke, Martha emerged, not running away, but advancing toward the attackers with a rusty scythe in her hand. Witness reports claim that she was able to injure 4 men before being finally dominated. Dragged out of the flames area, Martha remained standing even with her wrists tied. When the patrol leader asked if she had anything to say before being taken, Martha looked straight into the man's eyes, that same look that had disconcerted William Thornfield at the last moment. "You can catch me," he said in a clear and firm voice, "but they can't get what I planted. It's growing right now in each kitchen, in each field. One day the harvest will come." Martha's last words were recorded by a young reporter present and published in Philadelphia Function, despite attempts by the Virginia authorities to suppress them. Martha was taken to Richmond, where she faced a summary trial that lasted less than a day. On August 27, 1843, she was hanged publicly in the city center. Witnesses report that he refused to sell in his eyes and kept his eyes fixed on the horizon until the end. His body was denied to the grave, exposed as a warning for 3 days. On the 3rd night, mysteriously disappeared, taken by unknown hands to a resting place that authorities never discovered. In the decades that followed, Martha transcended history to enter the kingdom of myth. In the southern black communities, stories about it were transmitted in whispers, adapting and evolving with each new generation. In some versions, Martha didn't die in the gallows. The body that disappeared was proof that she had been rescued and continued her fight elsewhere. Coded songs appeared in the fields. Martha in the kitchen with eyes that see served as a warning to cruel lords. Small carved wooden knives became secret amulets among enslaved cooks. Carrying a Martha meant silent resistance. Objects associated with her gained almost sacred status. A fork allegedly used in the massacre was passed from hand to hand as a relic. Herbs tied in specific patterns were left on kitchens as a symbol of protection and promise. After the Civil War, reports emerged from people who claimed to have met Martha during their months of escape, each story adding new dimensions to their legend. A Baltimore free blacksmith swore he forged a special knife with the name of Ruth recorded on the blade. A midwife from Pennsylvania said that Martha taught her secret remedies that saved lives where white medicine failed. In the early 20th century, academics began to study the Martha case as a crucial example of slave resistance. White historians initially described it as an aberration, a criminal driven by temporary insanity. But black researchers like W.E.B. Du Oxen and later Angela Davis recontextualized their actions as a legitimate resistance against systematic oppression. The place where the Thornfield plantation remained abandoned for decades, the whites considered him cursed, the blacks treated him as sacred soil. In 1937, descendants of the enslaved who fled with Martha organized an annual pilgrimage to the place, a tradition that continues today. In 1972, a small kitchen knife was found during excavations on the ground. Analyses confirmed that it dated from the 1840s. It is now exhibited at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, with the simple description, possibly belonging to Richmond Martha, a symbol of resistance that refused to die. Official history may have tried to reduce Martha to a violent footnote, but in African American cultural memory, it remains the wind that blew through the plantations, remembering that even in more oppressive systems, human dignity finds ways of asserting itself. As a popular verse transmitted for generations in the black communities of Virginia says, "Martha has not died, just changed. Now she lives in each kitchen where fire burns with purpose." If you watched so far, it is because you care about these stories that marked our country forever. Leave a comment saying, "I watched here," so that I can meet you and know who really cares about the search for historical truth. Like this video if Martha's story touched your heart. Share so that Martha's memory will never be forgotten. Of the 84 slaves who fled the Thornfield planting that fateful night, 57 managed to reach the north. Among them was Betsy, the young woman who had marked the doors with chalk. At age 19, he settled in Rochester, New York, where, using the name Elizabeth Freeman, he opened a small clandestine school for black children. Its diaries, discovered in 1910, contain the most detailed account of Martha's planning and the days that followed the escape. Martha taught us that freedom is not just a place where it goes, but something that is carried inside, she wrote in 1851. 3 families who have escaped together found a small agricultural community around Syracuse, discreetly named New Richmond. There, they kept living the memory of Martha through annual rituals that combined Christian elements and preserved African traditions. A quilt by these families in 1860, now preserved in Smithsonian, contains codified symbols that narrate the whole history of the escape, including a central pattern that represents Martha leading their people through the waters, reminiscent of Moses. Other survivors integrated with the abolitionist movement. Joshua, a 16-year-old who had been an apprentice in Martha's kitchen, became a messenger to Frederick Douglass, carrying secret correspondences between abolitionist cells. Captured in 1847 during a mission in Virginia, he was questioned on Martha. Reports of the time claim that even under torture, her only words were, "She has shown us the way. Now we are many." The dispersion of survivors on the East Coast created an informal network that modern historians call Children of Martha, people connected not by blood, but by the transformative experience of that April night 1843. During the Civil War, at least 12 descendants served in the Union Army, carrying small talismans, usually a wooden miniature, such as protection and reminder of an old promise that, and the war itself, the promise that freedom, once planted in the heart, eventually finds its way to flourish. The Martha method, initially associated only with the violent act that launched mass escape, has evolved in the following decades to more subtle and lasting forms of resistance. In the kitchens of the large homes of the Southern, enslaved cooks developed a complex communication system through food, a slightly salty than normal dish, a dessert with a specific decoration pattern, the way herbs were arranged. Everything could carry messages for those who knew how to interpret them. White families had unknowingly ate meals that told stories of resistance right before their eyes. This culinary code, first documented in the 1930s by researchers at the Federal Writers Project, originated directly to Martha and its concealment techniques. In the plantations of Georgia and Alabama, a tradition known as Martha's silence emerged. One day a month when enslaved women refused to speak while working, communicating only by gestures and looks. For you, it seemed just a strange, perhaps superstitious behavior. For participants, it was a ritual reconstruction of power Martha found by refusing complete submission. After emancipation, former slaves took these practices to their new lives. In soul food cuisine that developed in the post-civil period, gastronomic historians identify techniques and combinations of flavors that can be traced to the innovations that Martha introduced into Thornfield kitchen. The use of hidden peppers in sweetness layers, the specific combination of bitter herbs with protein, were more than culinary choices, were coded memories of resistance. In 1889, a semi-secret society called the Daughters of the Kitchen was founded on Richmond by black women descendants of household slaves. Officially dedicated to culinary improvement, the organization maintained internal rituals based on Martha's story, including the initiation involving a hand swear with a hand on 3 cross knives. Society exists to this day, although it has become a cultural preservation association that documents and celebrates the African American culinary contribution to national identity. Thus, Martha's legacy transcended initial violence to become a living cultural force, proving, as she herself predicted in her last words, that what she planted would continue to grow in ways that her oppressors could never control or fully understand. For over a century after the 1843 events, the ruins of the Thornfield mansion remained as a ghostly presence in Richmond's landscape. Partially rebuilt in the 1850s by a distant cousin of the Thornfield, the property never prospered again. Successive owners reported inexplicable phenomena: lights in the kitchen at night, the smell of burnt caramel emerging from cold ovens, the sound of knives being sharp when no one was present. Workers hired for reforms often abandoned service after disturbing experiences. The most persistent legend involved the appearance of a red-scarf black woman, always seen in the old kitchen area, stirring invisible pans. In 1902, the mansion was finally abandoned after an unknown fire that, curiously, began in the kitchen and spread exactly like the fire of 1843. In the following years, the place became simultaneously a pilgrimage destination for black communities and a macabre attraction for white curious. Local teenagers challenged each other to spend the night in the ruins during the massacre's birthday. Many came back with stories of whispers in unknown languages and the sound of knives cutting the air. In 1937, when Howard University historians tried to excavations at the scene, a series of unexplainable accidents interrupted the project. Among the items recovered before the abandonment of the excavations was a small glass bottle containing what later analyzers identified as a mixture of human hair, dry herbs, and earth. Native to the region recognized the object as a protection pack, characteristic of Western African traditions preserved in enslaved communities. In 1972, after years of campaign by civil rights organizations, the ruins and the surrounding terrain were designated as a historical place, Memorial Site Martha de Richmond. A small museum was built at a respectful distance from the ruins, where documents, objects, and oral reports preserve not only the history of the massacre, but the whole context of slave resistance. Interestingly, even after the institutionalization of the site, employees of the museum occasionally report inapplicable nomens, especially in the reconstructed kitchen for educational purposes, where utensils change places at night and sensitive visitors describe a feeling of being observed by invisible eyes. As curator Helen Richardson said in 2010, "I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but if they exist, Martha has every right to still be here, watching her story correctly. If you watch so far, it is because you care about these stories that marked our country forever. Leave a comment saying, 'I watched here,' so that I can meet you and know who really cares about the search for historical truth. Like this video if Martha's story touched your heart. Share so that Martha's memory will never be forgotten."